these videos, I'm thinking. The old adage was 4 minutes, but these days I'm gonna kind of talk. Yeah, so what am I gonna talk about today? Today I think I'm gonna kind of talk about the chronic illnesses I've got. Well, specifically the main one now, which is common variable immune deficiency. I mentioned this in my previous video, and it's kind of an interesting disease. So, common variable immune deficiency, or CVID, is where your antibodies, which is part of your primary immune system, don't work properly, or you don't have enough, or they're getting destroyed. We don't really know. It's one of those mystery diseases that no one really knows anything about. Like most autoimmune diseases, to be honest. For CVID, it didn't even have an official diagnostic criteria until the early 90s, though we've known about it for over a century. In my case, I'm kind of atypical in that I never was chronically sick as a kid. Most people tend to get lots of sinus infections or lung infections or other things. I never really had that, so I'm kind of atypical in that regard. Instead, I have this whole mystery gumish of other symptoms. Specifically, all my lymph nodes are relatively enlarged. My spleen is enlarged. I have like a ring of lymph nodes here if you feel for them. Couple other things, and I have no detectable antibodies of basically any kind. So to treat that, there's a lot of different things they can do. For me, I receive monthly IVIG, or immunoglobulin, intravenous immunoglobulin, which is basically people who donate plasma, which you should do if you're a healthy person. It helps a lot of people, including me. So I go once a month, I get an infusion, which brings my antibody levels up. The last time they checked, I was almost approaching normal. This generally only replaces one type of antibody, but it's the kind that does most of the work you need. I also am lacking in all the other types, but it's not as much of a concern overall, I suppose. Yeah, so, I don't actually have a lot of side effects from CVID. Most of my side effects tend to come from other diseases or from the drugs I take. So, I take some drugs for platelet problems, which are related to CVID, but I've had the platelet problems before. Those drugs are pretty low impact, don't do anything, get my blood checked every month or so these days. But I'm also taking steroids, which are hitting me very hard. And the reason for that is that I have mystery lesions in my brain and lungs, which are probably related to CVID. It's probably something called GLILD, which is this kind of granuloma disease that causes you to have these regions of inflammation in your body. Without biopsying them, they don't know for sure, and I don't really want them to biopsy my brain because having anything stabbed into your brain sounds terrible. I don't really want them to biopsy my lungs either, and my pulmonologist was like, if it's what we think it is, we're going to give you steroids anyway, so let's just try steroids. If you haven't taken steroids before, they're great in that they solve whatever problem you have probably. They're terrible because the side effects are awful. For me, I've got not really insomnia per se, but I'm not sleeping very much, averaging 5 hours a night these days. And it also makes my blood sugar super, super bad, like, to the point that I'm essentially diabetic when I take steroids. And in fact, I take insulin like a normal diabetic right now. Not quite the same, because my body does make some insulin, so it's easier than like a true type 1 diabetic who only can use external insulin, but it's not great. I'm doing multiple injections, check my blood sugar several times a day. Should watch my diet. I haven't been as much, but I'm underweight, so I'm supposed to be gaining weight. I've also been throwing in some exercise, which will hopefully help build everything up, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at health-wise. I'm actually doing better from a mental perspective than I used to be. Maybe because I'm taking antidepressants. Maybe because when you have so many chronic illnesses, you get used to it. But my therapist says I handle my illnesses very well. I think I handle them average. But, you reach a level of absurdity where you just kind of have to deal with things. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Feel free to ask questions in the comments. Happy to answer them. I know a lot about this from both the patient and science perspective, so hopefully I have some good insights, and that's kind of all I got.